Charles Darwin once said that life is change and evolution. He had discovered God's game. Darwin wrote a wonderful book, which he entitled On the Origin of the Species. That may have been his one mistake, the name he gave to his theory. For some, the word origin had the same meaning as creation, and many people interpreted Darwin's work as denying the divine. That could not have been further from the truth. Darwin himself was a believer, or at least a doubter. He seems to have gone through various stages throughout his life, but it's clear that he was never a fanatic. He just liked to ponder things. Darwin's theory is scientific in its approach and was never meant to serve as an argument for atheism. But in the mid-19th century, science and religion were quite intermingled, and the uncomfortable notion that we evolved from monkeys brought on a deep emotional reaction in the society of the day. Not surprisingly. At a time when people believed the Earth was about 6,000 years old, instead of 5 billion, the evolutionary proposal called for the sudden revision of too many beliefs, and some religious concepts were forced to change, to evolve. As a result, the first week described in the book of Genesis necessarily came to be understood as a poetic description and not factual events of what actually took place over millions of weeks. This small intellectual move was actually a giant step for the thinkers of 1859. In fact, the theory of evolution continues to be unacceptable within several belief systems. Especially in so-called creationist thought. Perhaps from the perspective of these people, the mechanism proposed by Darwin is understood as a tool for rendering the existence of God unnecessary. But in reality, evolution can also be understood as a tool, the great tool used by the creator of the universe. A mechanism so pure, so simple, so perfect that it requires no touch-ups or modifications. It seems like a divine strategy, the strategy of the evolutionist God. And if he is there, watching us from on high, God must be as perfect as his plan, a plan that is written in a special ink called DNA. Through genetics, scientific reality has shown that we come not only from monkeys. Mammals and birds come from reptiles, which along with amphibians come from fish. And so forth, continuing back in time, we come to the single-cell organism. We are the direct descendants of one of these cells, the father of all humanity, the most primitive version of Adam. After thousands of years of civilization and 150 years of digesting Darwin's ideas, we shouldn't be afraid to question ourselves. No faith should feel attacked when scientific answers are being sought. After all, we are Homo querens, the being who wonders about everything. And more than anyone else, religious individuals should accept that we were created like that. That is, very, very curious. The evolutionist concept has been disseminated by different branches of human knowledge, just as mushroom spores are spread on a cool breeze. Each new season, countless spores are released into the autumn air by the mushroom kingdom. Over the period of a few days, each organism tries to reproduce to the best of its ability. The primitive strategy used by these beings consists of creating many countless possibilities for survival. Each of these reproductive cells will find its own fortune. The wind will blow them in similar directions, but no two will alight on the exact same spot. The unique genetic code written on the chromosomes of each cannot be repeated. They may be quite similar or nearly identical, but some will triumph, and others, the vast majority, will not. Some will be breathed in by an animal, others will fall into the water, and almost none of the rest of them will find an appropriate place to land, and therefore will not survive. But with luck, one of these spores, perhaps just fractionally rounder or more aerodynamic than the others, will be able to fly higher on the air turbulence created by insects, or will be more capable of holding up thanks to this year's lower humidity levels. And when it lands in the perfect place with the ideal adaptations, it will grow and prosper there where its siblings couldn't. At last, when it reaches the moment of reproduction, its own spores will incorporate those variations in its chromosomes that helped it find success, and its improved design will have a tendency to perpetuate itself in this environment. This is the essence of the changing life that Darwin understood and interpreted for humanity. Yes, Darwin's message is for people. It speaks not only of animals, plants, and mushrooms, but also quite a bit about human beings. Nevertheless, the incredibly civilized modern society we have developed lives almost entirely outside of these laws, as though they didn't exist. Most of us spend our lives ignoring the everyday effects that might benefit from a deeper knowledge of the amazing evolutionary cycle. If we understood it better, we could apply it, for example, to the education of our children, or to having a more active social life. And those who believe that its origin is divine could live their religion much better. A religion without magic, a religion that is consilient with science. It's worth taking a closer look at the biology that surrounds us. This is the only way we can live in harmony with all of the things we are made of. We should understand wildlife, not just admire it and protect it. So let's make an effort to learn an important lesson from Mother Nature. Sex, which can't be all that bad if it was designed by the Creator. The differences found between parents and children are the products of the infinite combinations that come up when the genetic lines of a female are crossed with those of a male. Thanks to sex, each new being that is born is different from all others. It's not just about pleasure, as some might believe. Sex is responsible for the diversity of a species. And diversity, the variety of individuals, is what will best guarantee survival when surroundings become hostile. Sex is an unstoppable drive that slowly but surely generates new life forms. The only thing is, because of sex, we must pay a price. Growing old and dying. Sexual strategy requires renewal, because if parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and the full range of ancestors were to live forever, there would be neither space nor food for their descendants. The system would collapse and be destroyed. It is our obligation to make way for new generations, continually improved upon and improvable. For this reason, when we get old, we waste away until our bodies disappear and our matter is recycled. An understanding of evolution could even help us accept death more easily.
Así que yo no tengo que ser cobarde tampoco.
Of course we don't like it. But if you think about it, an endless life would mean that we wouldn't be capable of enjoying the passage of time. It would have no value.
113.
From bacteria to multicellular organisms, evolution has tried many different reproductive strategies. But the procreative formulas which require the coming together of female and male, sexual reproduction, are not only about a lucky mixture of genes. In many cases, a choice has to be made between different possible mates. Subjective and crucial. A choice that, by the way, is always made by the feminine gender, the female. Males, like almost all females, their basic instinct is to spread their seed as widely as possible. But females are designed to evaluate, to filter, and thus offer a future only to the best. It's reasonable that females have the responsibility to choose. Best case scenario, we males help or pitch in a bit. But in the end, the effort required by a pregnancy, the gestation period, and raising kids falls squarely on their shoulders. This tarantula is considering whether or not the suitor that has crossed her path deserves to have babies with her. And in this species, a rejected male frequently ends up in the female's stomach. So he'd better be careful and give her lots of hugs and kisses while he's still got time. Looks like they're getting along. He's physically fit and knows how to flirt. I mean, come on. That's the very definition of a nice, attractive guy. What attracts two individuals of different sexes is sometimes a great, unfathomable mystery. But there must be some measure of instinct at play. Specifically, of those instincts that have enabled the species to survive up to now. If a couple did not obey those instincts, but rather became confused when choosing, they would probably be facing a dicey future. A good guide to love takes into consideration that old adage, opposites attract. In effect, this is the key to many selective protocols, also known as courtship. This helps us to understand why blondes like brunettes, or why short women are attracted to tall men. And it also provides an evolutionary explanation for the tendency of siblings and cousins to avoid relationships. The secret codes written on the spirals of our DNA tell us that mixing is a good thing. The combination of types or races gives offspring more possibilities to adapt. We can conclude that incest and racism are damaging to the human species. And believers will admit that such behavior is contrary to the Creator's will. Thanks to the evolutionist God, opposites attract is not the only element at play when choosing a mate. Sometimes a balance between the strange and the familiar is key. If we were attracted only by that which is different, we would end up trying to mate with other species, and that obviously doesn't work. Within populations that inhabit an extremely isolated spot, like this high-altitude lake, there is a certain level of inbreeding, which is to say everyone is related. Blood relationships generally have their problems, but sometimes evolution takes advantage of these circumstances to achieve ideal adaptations for living in a place as unique as this one. And in time, populations that are disconnected from their relatives can lead to variations and even new species. This evolutionary mechanism, which favors relationships between closely related individuals, may have been responsible for the different skin colors found in human beings. In Africa, where the sun's ultraviolet rays are exceedingly strong, people's skin became darker and darker with each generation. Those who had the darkest skin did not fall victim to skin cancer. They lived longer and so produced more offspring. More melanin meant better protection and more descendants. These individuals flourished, as opposed to those with lighter skin. Those in the north became whiter and whiter in order to make the most of the scarce solar rays at their latitude. That way, they could produce sufficient levels of vitamin D for maintaining strong bones and avoiding polio. The earliest individual natural selection, based on levels of epidermal melanin, first worked to avoid illness and favor survival in different climates. But today, proper clothing, air conditioning, and heating allow us to live wherever we want. Clothes and technology are part of what we call culture. In evolutionary terms, this includes everything we do that isn't instinctive, everything we have to learn. From crossing the street to reading. Today, thanks to culture, we can once again choose our mates based on something other than the color of their skin. Thanks to culture, our chromosomal wealth and the possibilities for the survival of our species can be further expanded. But culture is not all-powerful. It's true that some people have been able to reproduce with the help of test tubes, but if possible, the majority of us prefer to take a more traditional path. That's why we haven't completely forgotten our wild side. Especially the majestic wild side of the male. We know it's the females who choose who should reproduce and who shouldn't. These decisions can be evident or subtle, indirect, or even apparently indecisive, but it's the females who ultimately choose. Their methods occasionally make it seem as if those males were merely passive objects. Completely passive. And even though our activity is not always frenetic or continuous, let's not be too critical. Suggesting that the techniques we use must be presumptuous, direct, and quite simple doesn't mean that we mustn't use our little hearts and minds. Even though they are different from those of a female, they can be used to think like one when it's truly necessary. The thing is, we may have overestimated the organ of thought. So much reasoning when the thing we desire is so obvious, and when our desires coincide with what is necessary for the species. The clearest proof of the presence of striking young males in the multiplication game is that we can be found arguing, threatening, and even fighting with our peers, often putting our very lives in danger. We use up every drop of energy we have so that after this big sacrifice, only a few actually get to carry out the fleeting, longed-for chore. Whether one of Darwin's fundamental lessons or a part of God's game, machismo is a huge error. In terms of evolution, everything we do as males is directed toward impressing and taking care of females. Everything in our lives is done for them. We are organisms that are completely dedicated to females, or we should be. Those who don't accept that will be chosen less often, and in the end, will be condemned to disappearing from the evolutionary program. The pity is that sometimes evolution is too slow for our taste. But we should know that the way we behave with our prospective partner will also be tested and evaluated. That is, depending on how we behave, we may be chosen or cast aside. We don't know what a female praying mantis looks for when being courted. It should be solely a question of biology, considering that the male won't be helping her raise her offspring. But good manners are quite important here. If this male praying mantis doesn't have good boxing moves, he might be gobbled up by the female. The female has clearly misunderstood the love letters sent by her suitor. It's through this bestial strategy that natural selection rejects any male that may have acted too hastily, not leaving enough time for proper introductions. Individuals are rejected when they don't send a favorable ethogram, meaning that they didn't make a good approach, and so were not identified as the ideal candidate. The female saw him as an enemy, or simply as prey. His genes will not be passed on. Cannibalism is one of those matters which highlights the fact that the behavior of animals in the wild cannot be used to justify human behavior. It's also extremely clear that evolution takes many other things into consideration in addition to size and physical appearance. Behavior is fundamental, and so is experience. Behavior that includes raking the bottom of a lake with one foot to look for prey. This is not written out in full detail on the genes carried by this heron. Some things must be learned, and others must be practiced and perfected over an entire lifetime. Thanks to this fact, it's not only the largest and most beautiful that procreate, but also the best lovers. Good hunters, the hardest workers. Even the cleanest candidates count. For higher orders of animals, training and experience often determine the kind of sexual interaction practiced by each species, and even each group within a particular species. There are examples of polygamy, monogamy, and even your everyday single mother. Let's go in order from simplest to most complex. Snakes, which have nothing to do with the devil, represent the most basic and primitive level. Mates scarcely even live together. This female is carrying fertilized eggs in her belly. Right now, she's looking for a safe place to lay them. She hardly knew her mate. There wasn't much time for intimacy. One quick look was enough to convince her that his amazing body would make for great hunters. Her offspring would become great predators. The female knew she couldn't count on him for anything beyond that, so she wasn't concerned with learning more about him, and they never saw each other again. Nevertheless, the convenient role of single mother also comes with certain risks. So female snakes have to guarantee their lineage by having lots and lots of babies. Some lay as many as 50 eggs each year. And they mate just once each season. Female snakes are also quite prolific because as soon as they finish laying their eggs, the mothers abandon their offspring. They also opt out of all responsibilities related to raising their young, washing their proverbial hands of childhood and adolescence alike. Although the price is quite high considering the number of baby snakes that die. The young are armed only with instinct. Most will not survive their first year of life. This mode of reproduction might seem a bit inefficient, but for snakes and for many other animals, having males that act solely as egg fertilizers and females that do nothing to raise their young has actually worked out quite well. Obviously, the brains of these brutes were not designed for long-term relationships. This is the most basic of conjugal relationships, which is to say, the method that is furthest from that of humans. It's probably among seagulls that we can best observe similarities with our way of life, and where we may be able to draw the most conclusions on an evolutionary level. Just like us, seagulls live together in large groups. Like us, they go out each morning in search of nourishment and rob bits of food from other members of the group. Another trait we have in common is that we speak a complex language. It's unbelievable, but amidst the uproarious shrieks of the flock, each mate is able to easily recognize the voice of her other half. What's more, they generally live out their long lives of more than 30 years in a faithful relationship with a single mate. Seagulls are monogamous, or at least they try to be, like so many other couples. Seagulls spend most of the year in a calm, affable manner, concerned only with filling their bellies and preening their feathers. Their marital lives become complicated only when they are in heat, their hormones raging. That's when they nest and concentrate on raising their young. The advantage they have over humans is that this task takes up a mere 3 months of the year. But these are the worst moments. Gone are the moments of discussing whether to nest in the valley, on the cliff, or on a precipice with views of the bay. They've also left behind the mating season and quarrels about the egg-sitting schedule. The eggs have just hatched. Time is shorter than ever. Now they not only have to satisfy their own hunger, but the voracious appetites of their babies, whose cries for attention are never ending. This would fray anyone's nerves, and typical conflicts flare up about whose turn it is and who's carrying more than their fair share of the load. Specifically, the female has been waiting with her newborns for much longer than it usually takes to fly to shore, pick up some baby food, and fly back. Where did he get to? He often gets caught up with his pals, playing at something like who's better at flying upwind. The problem is that she can't leave her chicks when they're this young, and they do nothing but cry. But in a monogamous relationship, a firm commitment of both mates is the key to success. When each member of the couple takes care of his own chores, grudges are easily forgotten. And when we set our minds to it, we males are the best at feeding our families. The nature of reproduction seems to lead directly toward unlimited demographic growth. And indeed, each individual and each species, animal or plant, seeks to propagate itself to the best of its abilities. The result is an ongoing battle between all organisms. For this reason, the battle for survival is governed by rules that favor balance. Taking care of times when there are too many individuals in a species, or there is not enough food or territory, or when the number of predators, parasites, or illnesses rises, and the numbers begin to level out. This war is ongoing and will continue to be, just like the evolution that rids itself of these events. Generation after generation, descendants will acquire new adaptations to their surroundings. But since their surroundings are also ever-changing, more adaptations will always be necessary. We might conclude that nature is always a bit imperfect, can always be improved upon. Grebes are one of those species that can easily be identified as being in the midst of transition, and not just when the males begin to undertake their conjugal duties. Grebes are birds that are flying less and less and concentrating on diving. With each generation, their wings function more as fins and are less helpful for flying, enabling them to become better fishermen. This is a morphological adaptation, but it evolves according to the same principles that govern cultural adaptations in humans. Complex behaviors don't present themselves in genes with an instruction manual. This behavior is learned by some and taught and spread by others. We must understand that for us, the most intellectually developed of all animals, it is a cultural selection more than a biological one that is presently at work. This is another of the most momentous lessons we can take away from Darwin's theory. That our females choose their mates according to considerations that are far beyond physicality and instinct. It could be argued that humans have evolved in such a way that we have almost no instincts left. That our genetic makeup has concerned itself fundamentally with making room in our brains for the millions of details we have to learn and transmit in order to become attractive individuals. In fact, we are so non-instinctual that if we didn't directly observe other humans standing up, we wouldn't learn how to walk upright. If a human infant were raised not by people, but by a band of wolves or sheep, as has been documented, it would walk on all fours throughout its life. And of course, its intelligence would not be stimulated through its hands. That tiny man would howl or bleat depending on the circumstances, but he would never talk if no one were there to teach him. We must also understand that we belong to a unique lineage that has led us to be conscious of ourselves and conscious of the passing of time and of what the future implies. In general, animals don't think about whether they are male or female, or whether they are anything at all. And they obviously don't work on long-term projects. Other living beings don't need to. We do, because it is this personal and temporal conscience that most strongly influences the decision we make concerning a mate. Our selection is incredibly cultural. As the Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset once said, "We are the only animal that drinks without thirst and loves without time." To a great extent, our culture is based in knowledge that is stored in an amazing brain that seems to have quite a bit of unused space. Maybe that's why it's said that knowledge does not take up space. And since we are designed to know many things, knowledge can't be a bad thing. Only the absence of knowledge is bad. Anyone who's not sure of that, who rejects culture and knowledge or refuses to allow a person to learn to read, must be doing so out of fear. The fear that all of his peers are liberated by their own thought, choosing to reject his authority. Many people feel offended by Darwin's ideas, but perhaps they have failed to understand his message. There is nothing in On the Origin of the Species that denies the supernatural. The presence of God, whether or not he exists, cannot be proved or disproved through science. If he exists, he must be all-powerful, and it seems he has good reasons for maintaining his mysterious ways. He probably doesn't want to show himself, thus influencing our actions and restricting the freedoms we've been given. And if he doesn't exist, our view of the universe, which is limited to the time since the Big Bang, will never reveal the beginnings of the very beginning, the absolute zero of time. Mostly because there probably never was a beginning. The question could be eternally debated, but uselessly. The curiosity surrounding the existence of a supreme being, or in other words, the question of our own immortality, is beyond our comprehension. And although human hunger for knowledge is unlimited, we are not that great. The process of evolution has not shown whether our origins are divine or random, but it does offer some answers as to how we are made and the fascinating biological steps that life has taken in order to produce what we are today. What's more, if the theory of evolution has prompted disagreement because it examines our roots, it will be even more unsettling when we use it to look to the future. The perspective of our future points to a tremendous new consideration. Darwin's law implies that we will continue to evolve. Like any living organism, human beings are subject to biological laws. The fossils of our ancestors show how we have gradually changed from the Paleolithic to current day. And the process of evolution never ends. We may become stuck for a few million years, as is the case with our cousins, the chimpanzees. But we may just as easily continue to change, and that change may be rapid in geological terms, adapting to surroundings that we are constantly altering. Will we lose our wisdom teeth so that our skulls can become even bigger? Or will we become telepathic? Will we change so much that some new Homo species emerges? Or will we disappear? In the 19th century, we had to accept the fact that we descended from a monkey. It's now time to assume that someday we might become parents to other hominid species, which may be even more intelligent than we are. And that will require a new religious view to define who the chosen people are. But let's not mix science and belief. Fear not. God is an evolutionist, if he is actually out there. We will either change or disappear from the planet, as with the billion species of animals and plants that have preceded us in time. There seems to be no other solution, unless, like our ability to adapt our surroundings to ourselves, we learn to alter time, thus achieving some strange form of eternity. But I don't believe that. I can only hope there is something supernatural within us. Otherwise, there are only two possibilities for life: evolution or extinction.